Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things I've been wrong about. I don't fixate on them. I take the lesson and move on. I basically dropped out of paying attention to crypto in 2018, 2019, and even part of 2020 because I was sort of put off by the whole ICO craze and all the, terrible get rich quick schemes that were being launched and scamming people. So I kept, talking about Bitcoin and ETH and a few others, but I sort of lost interest in this space and I completely missed DeFi. I also completely missed NFTs. They were right under my nose. I had friends talking about them, participating in them. Literally, I was on a weekly call with a guy who turned out to be one of the biggest collectors on the planet. He would tell me every week about how he's buying this digital art, and I just kind of rolled my eyes and didn't get it. So I completely missed that. Going way back, like I'm an old school military history buff. So I grew up as a kid. I could have told you the throw weights of different nuclear missiles, and I had giant books about military fighters on my bookshelf. So I was kind of anytime a war comes on, I get obsessed and I just dive into it. I tweeted out a war of this recently. Don't ask me why. It's some child-driven testosterone thing from playing with too many military airplanes and tanks, and I used to play a lot of war games. And there was a time when I bought the whole Bush era Saddam has WMD. I fell for that line hook and sinker. So I was wrong about that. I was wrong about COVID very early on when people were dropping dead in the streets in the videos coming out of China. I thought, wow, maybe this thing has a very high CFR, confirmed fatality rate, but I turned around that pretty quickly, and I kind of came to the conclusion that no, it's kind of like a novel 10x flu, which is still really bad for older people. But my mental model then shifted to it impacts you as sort of the square of your age. So the older you are, the much worse time you're going to have. So I think I was wrong in my initial assessments about COVID, but I kind of stand by some of my later assessments or my current, more refined assessments. Mm. And well, I would say my whole theory of knowledge was pretty shaky and quite bad before I discovered Deutsch and Popper's work. So I was, infinitely wrong in many of those cases. I never bought into string theory, but I wasn't a fan of multiverse theory until I read some of the more compelling arguments from Deutsch and Sean Carroll. Look, most of us are wrong most of the time, but you don't need to be right a lot in this world, especially in the digital domain. In the physical domain, being wrong can have very large consequences, but in the digital domain, being wrong can have uh, not much consequences. You may lose the money you bet, or you wrote a piece of code that was useless, but being correct can have huge consequences. Positive, you can make asymmetric upside. You can make 100x or 1,000x your money on Tesla stock or on buying Ethereum at the right time. Or you can, reach a million people with the right tweet or the right message or the right podcast, perfectly crafted, while being wrong. It doesn't cost you much. So in certain domains, it makes sense to bet much bigger. These days, I just try to have less opinions about things. I kind of feel like I don't need to have an opinion on everything. And that's not for being right or wrong. It's just to kind of have mental clarity and to have peace of mind. You don't need to have an opinion on every person walking down the street or everything you see in the news or even about every form of government. There is an infinite set of things out there that are demanding your attention and trying to hijack your attention. Like I think like this is a little tongue in cheek, but the goal of media at some level is to make every problem your problem. And it's always offering you up. And social media does this in spades. It offers you up a new tweet or a new post and says, are you angry yet? No. Are you angry yet? No. Are you annoyed yet? No. Are you angry yet? And it just keeps going through like all these different sets of them and tries all different kinds until it finds something to get you hooked. So the way out of that trap is you almost have to you have to realize the mental load that happens on you when one of these loops gets stuck in your head. It's like when you listen to a song in the background and you don't necessarily love the song, but you just listen to it a couple of times and now it's looping in your head. Well, the news can do the same thing. Anger can do the same thing. And I think we're to some level, a lot of the anxiety that we suffer from is because we've taken on unconsciously all these problems. And then other people are coming in and trying to get you to solve their problem that they believe is the greatest problem in the world. So somebody will come along and say the greatest problem is that we're killing all the animals, and so you got to go vegan. Somebody else will say, it's climate change, and you shouldn't worry about anything else too. Worry about that. For many people, realistically, that's what's going on in Ukraine. For some people, it might be what's going on in politics. But everybody has a different set of problems, and you really have to learn to not take on other people's problems. This is not to say that you take on absolutely no problems, but first make sure that you are doing a good job of solving your own direct problems and that you have a clear mind before you then selectively choose other problems to take on, which you can actually have an impact on. Don't just take on problems that you can't solve.